The Gulf has entered one of the most volatile chapters in its modern history. What began as a war between the United States, Israel, and Iran has pulled nearly every country around the Persian Gulf into a widening web of missile strikes, maritime threats, and shifting alliances. Oil-rich, densely populated, and home to some of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth, this region now sits on a knife's edge. And the ripple effects are being felt worldwide. At the center of it all is Iran. After a series of American and Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, Tehran retaliated not just against Israel, but against its Gulf Arab neighbors. Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar have all been hit. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which a fifth of the world's oil flows, was declared closed by Iran and remains only partially open. Even countries like Oman and Qatar, which host US forces or have tried to stay neutral, have found themselves directly targeted, forcing them to publicly condemn Tehran while still trying to keep diplomatic channels alive. This is where the real danger lies. It isn't just two-country conflict anymore. It's a regional chain reaction, and every new strike raises the odds of it spinning further out of control. Now let's look at how this is actually playing out on the ground. Starting with infrastructure. Iran has warned that any further attacks on its energy sites will trigger retaliation against energy infrastructure across the Gulf, and Gulf states have taken that threat seriously. American and allied military bases in the UAE and Kuwait have already been struck. Desalination plants, which much of the Gulf depends on for drinking water, have been floated as a potential target, a threat serious enough that it's shaping the entire defensive posture of Gulf governments. Then there's Yemen's Houthi movement, which has opened its own front in this war. The Houthis have resumed attacking oil tankers in the Red Sea, including vessels linked to Saudi Arabia, and have threatened to expand their strikes into the northern Red Sea after Saudi shipping. Companies began rerouting away from the Bab el-Mandeb choke point. This is a group that has already forced much of global shipping to avoid the Red Sea entirely in favor of the long way around Africa, and its renewed activity threatens to lock that disruption in for the long term. Which brings us to the maritime pictures as a whole. With Hormuz effectively choked and the Red Sea under renewed threat, two of the world's most critical trade arteries are simultaneously at risk. Tankers are being rerouted, insurance costs are spiking, and oil markets have swung wildly, dropping sharply on any sign of de-escalation and spiking the moment new strikes are reported. For global trade, this isn't a regional inconvenience. It's a structural risk to how goods and energy move around the planet. Faced with all this, Gulf and regional powers are rethinking their old assumptions about security almost in real time. For decades, the Gulf leaned heavily on the United States as its primary protector. That single point of reliance is now being questioned. The clearest sign of this shift came just recently, when Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan signed a landmark mutual defense agreement in Mocha, declaring that an attack on any one of them would be treated as an attack on all three. This builds on an earlier defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, and it brings together a major oil producer, a NATO member, and a nuclear-armed state into a single strategic bloc, something regional analysts are already calling a potential Islamic NATO. Officials insist the pact isn't aimed at any one country, but its timing, coming after repeated strikes on Gulf states and lingering distrust of Israeli intention in the region, speaks for itself. Not every Gulf state is reading the moment the same way. Saudi Arabia has pushed for de-escalation and diplomacy, even hosting peace talks, while the UAE, having absorbed more Iranian strikes than any other Gulf state, has taken a far more hawkish stance and deepened its ties with the US and Israel. That split matters, because it shows the Gulf Cooperation Council isn't acting as one unified bloc anymore. Each country is recalculating its own risk, its own alliances, and its own red lines. Underneath all of this is a financial reality Gulf leaders cannot ignore. Years of work to diversify their economies beyond oil, building up tourism, finance and technology are directly threatened by a prolonged conflict. This economic fear is pushing these new alliances just as much as the attacks are. So where does this leave the Gulf? A region trying to defend its infrastructure, protect its shipping lanes and hedge against the risk of over-relying on any single ally. All while the war, the next door, refuses to fully end or fully resolve. Whether the new alliances forming right now become a lasting shift in Middle Eastern power or just a temporary reaction to an unprecedented crisis is a question that will define the region for years to come.